little boy at play.
I don't remember growing older. When did they?
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Ed Park. We're starting a webinar today on the subject of circadian rhythm. This opening slide is interesting. It's about the circadian rhythm. You can see in the background there's a wave up and a wave below, like a sine wave. And the up is meant to indicate the daytime when the sun is high and cortisol is high. The nighttime is the yin phase. And so if you put these halves together, you see a whole, a sort of a yin-yang cyclicity anyway. And we've talked about in the past many times how when you go to sleep, the first part is physical repair and the second part is psychological repair. And so let's go ahead and talk about what the circadian rhythm is. Why did we do this topic? I have been getting some complaints about sleep difficulties and either not being able to stay awake, or I actually had a problem the other night locking myself in the office, so I had disrupted sleep. So that kind of was the genesis of doing this. Over the last 4.5 years of taking this and prescribing it, I've noticed that TA65 users have a lot of sleep changes. That's the primary thing. Specifically, they have changes in their dreaming, in their depth of sleep, in the middle of night awakenings, napping during the day, and an entrainment or a kind of training of the circadian rhythm. It gets very interesting and precise and strong, meaning people will just crash at a certain hour every day, which is appropriate, sleep time, but nevertheless, that's something people notice. Secondly, people notice changes in their temperature, both their core temperature and their tolerance, usually to cold. I had a gentleman, a friend of mine, say, I was always the coldest guy in the room, always had to wear a jacket, and soon after starting, I was fine. And I certainly have noticed my tolerance to cold is much different as well. But specifically on the first night of starting, a lot of people describe a warmth or a tingling or maybe like a prana activating. Thirdly, the biological clock changes. Again, there can be a very precise ultradian, which is, we'll describe what that is, but short-term time perception. And also, when people do wake up, they have a gross early estimation of what time it is. Like it'll be 3 in the morning, they'll think it's 8 because they're basing it on how mentally refreshed they are. And that's one of the pitfalls of taking it, is that you can get up and do stuff and not really attend to the sleep cycles that you need to repair your psyche. So there are changes in the biological clock. There are changes in the mood. People attribute this to having a more restorative sleep, but I think it also has to do with neurogenesis, which is creating new brain cells, the 10,000 new brain cells you create every night to hardwire your memories and to make sense of the previous day. Appetite changes are common. Increase in appetite is the most common, but a decrease, paradoxically, in nighttime junk food cravings. Again, this is all anecdotal, but we're involved in kind of an observational endeavor here. So we listen, we take in what everyone says, and try and find the patterns in the symptoms. Sexual function tends to be increased in both men and women, both in terms of libido, but also in terms of women ovulating. So we have people resuming menses, interestingly, after menopause. And I even have a patient who delivered last month at the age of 42 who hopefully we'll be talking to soon. Immune function tends to be greatly improved. And so all these things spell or point towards something that is circadian in nature going on. So what is a circadian rhythm? Well, circadian rhythm is 24-hour. It can be 23.5 to 24.5 hours. Circa meaning going around, or circle, and dian mean the day. It primarily is entrained by blue light, 480 nanometers in length, and that when the blue light is on, it connects with something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the chiasm is where the optic nerves cross. It's an X, and right above that is the hypothalamus, and that's where the biological clocks are. And the suprachiasmatic nucleus talks to the pineal gland, this primitive third eye gland, and that's what suppresses the melatonin. When the blue light goes down, the melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland. Zeitgeibers are time givers, like you know the phrase Zeitgeist is Zeitgeist is the spirit of the times. Zeitgeber is a time giver. So this is what entrains your circadian rhythm. Of course, the major one is the light, specifically the blue light most potently. But temperature, social interactions, pharmacological manipulations, obviously, exercise, eating and drinking, these things all can have effects. Going back to pharmacology, there's melatonin, which a lot of people take these days, but also things like cortisol, adrenergics. These are all tweaking the system, which is meant to be in balance. I'm going to introduce the term circadian, we know, but infradian is a rather clumsy term of art. It means below a day. So what somebody tried to say was infra, like infrared, is a slower wave, or red, and ultraviolet is a faster wave above. What they're alluding to the wave nature of these periods. So an infradian time is like a menstrual time, 28-day estrus or ovulation cycle. And that is as opposed to ultradian, which is a faster cycle, meaning like the sleep cycles which we typically have being 90 minutes or so. And so there are time clocks intrinsic to the system that measure perception of time, although these do change as we get older. Interestingly, when people say, well, time flies so fast when you get older, well, that's kind of life event time. You know, Christmases come closer together, but if you actually measure the ultradian time perception, it erodes like a worn-out clock. So teenagers, if you give them a 3-minute period, they'll say it's like 3 minutes and 4 seconds, but older folks will say it's like 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So the actual physical clock deteriorates and becomes less precise. Let's look at this Vitruvian Man in the middle here. It's just Leonardo's masterpiece, one of them. And what he's pointing to is that it's a cycle. So let's say you go to sleep around midnight. Your deepest sleep, again, as we've talked about in the many podcasts, would be corresponding to a growth hormone surge and a really physical paralysis, slow wave sleep, total death or unconsciousness. And this is when your body is hastily repairing cells, ligaments, physical structures. The body temperature nadir is around 4:30, and then around these times, the last 2 or 3 or 4 cycles are mostly dreaming. And then throughout the day, if we're a normal person, we have changes in our blood pressure, bowel movements, alertness, coordination, and this is the cycle of life. With the dim light creating melatonin secretion about 9 p.m., getting you drowsy until finally go to sleep around midnight. What we have here on the bottom left and bottom right are 2 tables letting you know that it's not just a simple light create or inhibits melatonin. Melatonin makes us sleepy. There are so many different pathways that are entrained and working on a daily circadian rhythm. So, for example, these neurohormones, which would be prevalent or active during the day, would be cortisol, the stress hormone, serotonin, which they're talking about as being a happiness or impulse control, GABA, which is inhibitory or calming, and dopamine, which is related to alertness. I mean, these are gross simplifications of their functions. Whereas melatonin is a neurohormone that, of course, is active during sleep. The neuropeptides would be follicle-stimulating hormone, which is the sex hormone for men and women, gastrin-releasing peptide for hunger, and also neuropeptide Y, the thyroid-stimulating hormone, again, which is go, go, go during the day. And during the night, the blood pressure is restored to a very low state, and the growth hormone is peaking, ironically, so that we can rebuild and anabolically restore ourselves. So that peak happens about 2 hours after sleep onset. I put the date of 2002 here to serve a point. You know, doctors and scientists are really amazing at discovering things, but it wasn't until 2002, relatively recently, that they discovered that the entrainment of light was not due to the rods and the cones, but if we have the retina, the inner surface of the retina here, these are the rods, black and white, movement perception. These are the RGB cones. There's a deeper layer here called the intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglia cells. So this was heretofore unknown until 2002. And this is actually the way that the organism perceives light. So you have one circuit going to the green here, which is the pupillary light response, maybe ocular, pupillary, optical, or whatever. This is why your pupils dilate and constrict in response to light conditions. And then there's also these circuits going to, as we talked about, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, this is the pituitary gland, and this is the hypothalamus, which is usually the master control or the control room for the secondary control of the pituitary. Anyway, not important that you know that. What's important is that these are relatively new cells in the retina which detect light and which will feed back to the pineal gland and tell the pineal gland, hey, it's daytime. See? This was before the discovery. Probably someone made this chart. They didn't even know what they were called, but they're these retinal pigment ganglion cells. And so it goes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the clock, and it feeds back and tells the pineal gland, hey, don't release melatonin. Okay, so what is the pineal gland? The pineal gland is in the back here, and it's like a third eye. In early vertebrate ancestors, there was actually an opening canal leading to this eye, so it has some kind of photoreceptor capacity, and it's thought that the modern vertebral eyes evolved from a structure common to the pineal gland. Anyway, the pineal gland is outside the blood-brain barrier, so it can release its melatonin high levels into the bloodstream, and it delays puberty. So kids sleep a lot, and then once they go through puberty, the melatonin level drops, and that's perhaps why they have problems with sleep cycling, and they sleep in later and things like that. Of note, in the birds and other animals, it's involved with magnetic and fields and navigation for birds. Which may be also somewhat active in humans, we don't know. But it is known that electromagnetic fields, of which we're bathed in constantly these days, can also disrupt the pineal function, perhaps due to electromagnetic interference or even gravitational changes. Let's get back to something more concrete. SAD is seasonal affective disorder. I think most people know what this is. It's related to the lack of light, especially in the higher latitudes where people can be prone to alcoholism, depression, suicide. And this is reflected here with Florida being the case of seasonal affective disorder being very low. As you go higher in latitude, Maryland, New York, New Hampshire, then the prevalence will go up. The thought being it's related to light. So what is it about the light that causes people to get sad? And paradoxically, it can also happen during the high light months, so to speak, in the summer. But usually it's during the lesser light times. And so some people think that rather than the lack of light, it's the excess of melatonin that's causing depression. In other words, there's not enough light or blue light. So the pineal gland is very active and it's bathing or it's oversaturating the system. It's interesting. So they have a melatonin agonist, or a drug that binds the melatonin 1, 2, and the serotonin, of course, the happiness receptor. But paradoxically, that has an antidepressant effect. So it's not really known whether melatonin is a good thing or a bad thing for depression. It could be that, as with many systems, it's related to signal receptors. If you oversaturate the receptors, maybe there's a lack of balance that causes the problem. But certainly that's a well-known condition, and one that in many of the Scandinavian countries, for example, people will go to light centers to get their photo light or their blue light or what have you. And light therapy is a great way to restore a more even and balanced circadian rhythm. When we talk about jet lag, we're talking about sleep phase disorders. So think about, again, waves, phases, periodicity. The familial advanced sleep phase disorder means that the circadian curve is shifted left. So these people are early birds. And it's an interesting disease. They go to sleep. They can't help themselves. So about 7:30, they wake up at 4:30 in the morning. And so, again, this is a normal, let's see, 4, 6, 7.5. That's 5 cycles of good, healthy sleep. 90 minutes times 5 is that. And interesting, this is caused by a single mutation, a known mutation. Like there's the A and the G and the C and the T in the DNA. One single mutation causes a different amino acid, and it causes the clock to be imprecise. So it's like this background clock. It just doesn't keep time right. It keeps time improperly. So fascinating. It's autosomal dominant. It's very high penetrance. So it's really just a single mutation, single point mutation. Whereas the delayed or the night owls, people go to sleep at 4, wake up at noon. So far, they haven't found that direct correlation. It could be more syndromic and maybe typical in some people like teenagers or people that get depressed. So there's different kinds of lag that's not just related to travel. This slide just emphasizes the different wavelengths. So what you'll note here is that daylight is the blue. It's got all these colors of the rainbow, which is why you make a rainbow when the sunlight hits water in the air. Whereas incandescent light, or the old, 60-watt bulb, is here, closer to the red. I guess the longer wavelength would be the more red side. Infrared, ultraviolet again. And so you don't really get much entrainment of the circadian rhythm. If you're indoors all day, in other words, you don't get the same kind of bang for your buck as you would from being just outdoors. And it's very important when you travel to get that sunlight so your body can quickly entrain or retrain to the local time. Fluorescent light has these peaks. But again, 480 is where we want to be for blue. So there's some kind of, it's not good to have these lights. If you want a circadian train, you want natural sunlight. Or at least, even blue light would be helpful. Let's look at this. This is kind of intimidating. Phase response curve looks like electrical engineering or something, but let's break it down so it's not as intimidating. What we're basically trying to represent here is how does the phase response shift, right? So let's say you get a bunch of bright light at night. What's going to happen? It's going to delay. So that's what this means, -2. So if you go up to Alaska and it's summertime, so much blue light is going to delay your curve. So every night you'll get -2 hours. So your sleep time will push back. Of course, if you get light way in the dawn, if you don't have shades and you're woken up in Alaska at 4 in the morning, then what's that going to do? That's going to advance your sleep time. So +2, that's going to shift the curve to the left. So you'll be getting up earlier and earlier. And this is intuitively makes sense. It's just when we travel to different places, if we get a lot of light, we go to sleep later. If the light is towards the dawn, we can wake up earlier. So that's what the light does. But let's look at melatonin. So here's, again, this curve. Bright light is this deep purple. Melatonin is this light green. So if it was just light was mediating through melatonin, every time that you'd be on the minus side, you'd be on the plus side, and vice versa. So that holds true here in the morning, in the early evening, in the afternoon. But there's a time after sleep when they're on the same side again, just for this brief period. In other words, it will delay, it will shift to the right or make your bedtime later. So it's not exactly inversely correlated. So who cares? The point is, for the 8 hours before sleep, if you're taking melatonin, see, we're green, we're above the curve. What we're doing actually is making our bedtime earlier. So it's not like you pop a Benadryl and it makes you drowsy and it puts you down. Melatonin will make you sleepy, but it also will change the bedtime earlier and earlier, which is not something you want to do. You want to be running like a clock in a 24-hour cycle. If you take melatonin, which most people do before sleep, and it's still in your system, then the opposite happens. Look, you're going to sleep at 10 o'clock or whatever. If the melatonin is still on board, look what it's doing. It's messing up your cyclicity, and your phase response is shifting, again, to the minus side. So the melatonin, especially in the doses that people take, will make your bedtime later. Is that right? Oh, no. Yeah, I guess it goes the other way. So when we're here, we're on the minus. Here, it's the plus. So you're going to sleep earlier bedtime. Here, it's going to sleep later. So, it's hard to understand, but basically, better to take Benadryl and not screw with your periods. You want to be on a 24-hour clock. You don't want to be shifting it every night by taking melatonin. I mean, it's fine if you're taking sunlight because that's the place where you've traveled to, and that's good. But if you're pushing around with melatonin, then that's not so bueno. So let's talk about melatonin addiction. Melatonin is a very popular substance. It makes people sleepy, and it doesn't appear to be addictive in the way that, say, an Ambien or a Valium would be. And so people say, well, it's natural. Well, natural is not synonymous with good. Beta endorphins, like the things that the runner high, that's an opiate. That's natural. Is it good? Maybe. You earned it by running and doing good things, but no one would say that taking Vicodin or heroin is natural or good. Also, endocannabinoid receptors, we make these things like THC or the active cannabinoid molecule. All kinds of our little hormones, our neurohormones are made that are normal. It doesn't mean they're safe or they don't affect us. When you hear people say, well, I need my melatonin to sleep, the word need and the emphasis suggests a sort of dependency or addiction. In fact, so much so that in Europe it's a controlled substance. It's not something you can just buy out of a health food store. Interesting side effect of melatonin is that it causes vivid dreams, which is probably the most reliable indicator of TA65 working. So entertaining the idea that maybe the TA65 is enhancing melatonin secretion, and that's the mechanism. I used to think, or still kind of think, it might be due to quicker neurogenesis, but it could be both. So when you're taking melatonin, it's like, you're forcing yourself into this excess sleep. It's kind of like being in this dark movie theater. I'm not sure, but it's really more like these kids. You want to pull the sister. You don't want to push the sister. What's going to happen when you pull? And in this analogy, it gets dark, you get sleepy, the melatonin, you go to sleep. When you're taking a bunch of supernormal melatonin, you're pushing, and this is going to be wobbly. Not only is it going to be wobbly and uncontrolled, it's better for the system to demand and make it than for you to take it, because that's going to, as we just learned, mess up even the periodicity. It's going to always move around your normal circadian rhythm. So that's why most people love melatonin, and doctors don't say don't take it, but it's a hugely potent drug, and it, in my opinion, is really only best suited for short-term jet lag. Nightly melatonin use, it may not bear the hallmarks of addiction, but it's probably not a good thing to be forcing your system to shut down in that manner. Let's look at the sleep architecture. What we're seeing here on the left is during the day, we're stressed, the cortisol is high, and during the night, the adrenals can rest. And your body will pair with the growth hormone spike. And in the REM sleep, here's the first 2 cycles of sleep from, let's say, midnight to 1:30, and then 1:30 to 3 would be in this deep, slow wave sleep. Really, you're unconscious, you're dead to the world, the body is peaking with its growth hormone, and all your physical cells are reproducing. Whereas cycle 3, 4, 5, and maybe 6 most of the time is spent dreaming in REM. So this would be the defragmenting and refragmenting and creation of new brain cells required to heal the mind. This is a really interesting topic, and one, if you're interested in, go see podcast 33, which is about TA65, frequently asked questions, and we discuss the yin and the yang of the day and the night. And 26, we'll talk about addictions, and like people like Elvis and Jimi Hendrix and Janis, it turns out they weren't drug addicted so much trying to medicate their insomnia from all these psychotropic drugs, and so the insomnia is really a feature of addiction, and the addiction can be alleviated or ameliorated by better sleep. And the one that started all was podcast 9. So as a lot of people are moving towards a holistic model, I wanted to emphasize the missing W here, which is it's a whole. We need both the male and the female, the active, positive male, sunlight, cortisol, logical left brain, and we need the right side, the dark, the passive, intuitive, soft, in order to be whole. And that's why in the bright there's a little dark, and in the dark there's a little bright. So in order to be a whole person, we need balance. And so here is a helix, which is kind of like a three-dimensional swirling spiral, and it just tells you that we can't exist without the feminine, sacred feminine, and the masculine, and that's what causes good health, is balance. There is an internal clock, and so the reason I decided to do this webinar is that we noticed pretty much across the board, first night, that people will have sleep changes. And they can be of a very, usually it's predictable, but again, there are problems with the middle of the night awakenings. And I believe that, just to digress, that people, I've noticed that my circadian clock gets very precise. So even though it's not a soporific, and it could be conditioning, at like 12:07 every day, my body knows 12:07, I can't keep my eyelids open. People's my time estimation, ultra D, and so to speak, is really good. If people ask me anytime, what time do you think it is, I'm pretty precise. And I remember one night I did an experiment while I was being woken. Sometimes if you run a little hot, you wake up every 90 minutes, as I've explained to our users of TA65. And I remember this one night, I said, God, I'm waking up every 90 minutes. And sure enough, the mind being such a powerful thing, I woke up exactly at every 90-minute intervals, like 3 a.m., 4:30, 6. I mean, literally, I look over at my clock, and it was exactly that time. So whatever this TA does, it seems to be cleaning our clock, so to speak, so that people tend to run on a more precise, tight circadian rhythm. And again, I think that relates to all the internal clock mechanisms of the hypothalamus, which regulate temperature, sexuality, appetite, mood, all the hormones in their diurnal rhythms. Because, of course, the hypothalamus controls the pituitary, and the pituitary controls all those other organs like the thyroid and the adrenal and the sex glands. So, one thing that is of great concern to me, and one of our patients, Connie, asked me about it, is she can't sleep well. So I think the primary thing you need to worry about is that you're thinking good thoughts when you're sleeping. I cannot impress to you the importance of that. Given the choice between thinking something positive and thinking something negative, please think something positive. I've had many people say to me, these nightmares, I can't take the TA, it's giving me nightmares. Well, what's the last thing you think about when you go to sleep? Well, boy, I'm going to have nightmares, or boy, this stuff is too dangerous to take, or, what if God punishes me for living too long? Will I age faster? I mean, you got to think positive. We are our thoughts. We actively create our reality. So if you're thinking bad stuff, you're going to dream bad stuff, and then you're going to become bad stuff. So Cliff asks, what happens to people who regularly work at night and sleep during the day? How does the circadian cycle come into play long term then? How would TA65 affect these people? This is a good question. Night shifting is bad. You're totally syncopating your life. But if you keep it on, like I did the most night calls during my internship and residency of anybody, and so yeah, you're going to sleep like a vampire. But if it's regular, your body can entrain to it as long as you have good sleep hygiene, meaning darkness when you're asleep. It's all about the light. If you're sleeping in a bright light and you're working at night, this is really bad for your health. I think TA65 really helps a lot with jet lag and in training. And so it's a huge adjunct, even at a low dose when you travel, for all you people doing summer travel. TA65 and some light will just fix you right up, in my experience. And plus the stress of sleeping in a strange place, it puts you down so deep that as long as you're thinking good thoughts, you'll be good. Your husband was telling me that you noticed an improvement in the jet lag?
It seems to, particularly on the on both directions. I've just been through a pretty whirlwind. I was in UK, India, Slovenia, UK, and Austria, and back to Honolulu. And I noticed almost no jet lag, particularly on the outbound.
John asks, I'm trying to get my mom to continue to take it so she can experience the energy that I've had by taking it. However, she stopped because of nightmares and hot and cold feelings. Well, certainly the hot and cold can be related to various things, and it's always important to check your thyroid function, because thyroid, in my experience, can go up or down depending on the mechanism. But again, nightmares is strictly, that's just because you're thinking bad thoughts when you go to sleep. I mean, you need to think good thoughts. Think, happy thoughts. Think Rodgers and Hammerstein. Don't think Hitchcock and Corman. More so for hot, cold spiders on her legs. She has diabetes, by the way. Well, the spiders are paresthesias, so that typically, in a lot of people, represents actually a good symptom. It represents a restoration of nerve function. We have a lot of people with stocking glove peripheral neuropathy who it tends to go away. So you got to be careful making a negative assessment of paresthesias. Get a lot of people who have inflammation of joints, and that's just the cell death and clearance. So a lot of times people will get inflammation of damaged joints and ligaments, only to be followed by just a very subtle disappearance of symptoms. So that's just the pain to get you to the gain. But a lot of people will have this awakening of life force or prana even on the first night. Accompanied by pain. It was scary for her. Listen, there's something called the amygdala in our brain, and I don't care who you are, how elevated your consciousness is, number one is self-preservation and fear. So fear is definitely the strongest emotion we have. So in all things, it's good to manage and modulate and reinterpret our fear. So again, if you're very fear-based and taking this stuff, it's going to be a bad experience sleeping. And if you're thinking the twitching and the tingling is some kind of, spiders, that's bad. If you're talking about reawakening of the nerve endings, well, that's good. I mean, look at the podcast on the twins. Their hair was regrowing on their arms. You could say, oh, God, this dead hair is coming back after 20 years. That's great. Or you could say, my God, I'm going to be a wolf man, and I'm going to, eat the children's dogs or something. You don't. Again, as we all know, attitude determines everything. It's the spin. The most powerful organ is the mind. So think good thoughts. I can't impress upon you how important that is. Cliff asks, do the nightmares occur because the causes of nightmares are just being exposed, or are the causes also being flushed out? That's a great question. I think yes is the answer to that, both. Because as we know, taking this, strange things will come out of our psyches. Like I'll have dreams about dream fragments that I didn't think about for 20 years. So what happens is, as the brain is defragmenting, memories, which are data plus emotion, come out of the closet, and they make these weird cameo appearances. But, they're both, the skeletons are coming out and dancing. Yes, a lot of it may be some kind of Freudian repressed psychological stuff. Who knows? But yeah, that's an interesting thing think about. But don't forget, we do have a kind of an overmind, or like a consciousness that kind of maintains our consciousness. So insofar as you can, be your own best friend, and anticipate that weird things are going to come out, old boyfriends or whatever, girlfriends, and just have fun with it. Learn to dance to the crazy music that comes out. I think I always tell my kids, there's 3 things you want to do. You want to learn as much as you can, because life is short. You want to get rid of your fears as much as possible and try and make the world a little better place in the way that you can. So, any other questions? Sorry to pontificate like that, but I do really think it's important, even if you don't take TA in general. I mean, we're all pretty smart people. We figured out we are our own worst enemies, and the demons are all inside us. So we need to learn how to be our own best friend somehow, with or without TA. And I know so many people of my patients are just wonderful. They do this, that, they do meditation, they eat well, they exercise. But again, it's a holistic thing. Even you go to the mountain, or you get enlightenment or samadhi or whatever, your theta waves, you got to come back and live in the world. We're still people. We still have a human scale of perception. So enlightenment is not a destination. You just there are times you swing back and forth. You're on a journey, and this is just a tool for you to stay more balanced. I think it just enhances people's ability to be balanced, to restore when they need to restore, which is why in the TA65 webinar I said don't take it in the morning, because I really think that the morning is active, and you need to have your yin on. You need to have your office yoga and your deep breathing and your focused meditation. And when you're asleep and the body is shut down, that's when you can go gangbusters on anabolic growth and rebuilding. John asks, does bad sleep shorten telomeres? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it's known that children have shortening of telomeres because of, who knows, sleep disruption, adrenal fatigue. But if you look at kids from Romanian orphanages, ones that were adopted out to foster care versus left in the institution, the telomere attrition was worse. And we've seen that in a couple of child studies. So it's the same mechanism in all organisms. Stress kills. We saw that in the Nobel Prize winner Blackburn and her study with Lisa Appel of women caregiving to disabled kids. If you don't have that restorative sleep, then bad things will happen. And I think if you watch the PMR webinar we did, this amazing 3 calls right before her husband died, right after he died, and with some time to reflect, her ability to let go and to be at peace because of the TA was remarkable. And that's just really an amazing one to listen to. Her life partner of like 50, 60 years was dying, and yet she said, I just feel calm. I can feel like I can let go. And, the scars of a partner fading away or suffering, they linger, and they do DNA damage. And it's no accident that spouses of cancer victims get cancer soon thereafter. It's not contagious. It's just the organism needs to rebalance and heal. There was an interesting study about autoimmunity, which I'll put into the final edit. But again, Th1 is the cell immunity, which is responsible for cancer, virus correction. Th2 is daytime immunity. And so you need to have that balance too. And it's thought that an imbalance of that can lead to autoimmune diseases. So as anybody will tell you, autoimmune diseases have a huge relationship to sleep disruption and psychic imbalance. Does bad sleep shorten telomeres? I think bad sleep probably does. I've had people say, man, my body was so rested, but I woke up exhausted. And this is not atypical because you're going through so much life stress that from 4 to 6 in the morning, it's like you're cramming for an exam. Your subconscious is trying to work out issues, and you're spiritually, mentally exhausted, but yet your body could feel good. And that's a really interesting thing. That's why there's a phenomenon. People wake up at 3 in the morning, ask what time is it, they'll go, it's 8. They feel refreshed in a way, and yet it's dark out. So this is where people get into trouble. They'll get up and start doing cleaning or reorganizing, and it's really the cycles number 3, 4, 5, and 6 that are important for the brain to heal. And that's why in the addiction webinar you'll see that because all the psychotropic drugs mess up your sleep quality, you're basically not getting any sleep, and that's why it's hard to unlearn the addictions. So it's all part of the dysfunction of the organism. So again, no sleep drugs, please. And melatonin only episodically. It's potent stuff. It's a controlled substance. John asks, my sister has MS. I want her to try TA65. We did a webinar on MS, and so I recommend you to take a look at that. You know, this is just what we call an N of one case, but I think it's worth a try, especially if you know somebody with PMR. I mean, that was really astounding. For whatever reason, right after she started taking the TA, we're talking like a $219 investment, and then for some reason her disease is permanently gone now. She no longer takes the TA. So I'd say that's a pretty good bargain. I mean, she did lose some hair, but I mean, she was really in a existential hell in terms of her chronic pain. She couldn't sleep, and when she did, she was in a chair, and she woke up even worse. John is the most participatory. He says, I've had physical side effects, but the feeling of taking TA65 is worth it. Great. You know, I really have to stress that TA65 doesn't do anything. It really, I mean, I've taken 12, the equivalent of 12. I've taken none. No difference. I can't feel it. But now that I've stopped and started up, I realize that it really, the way that you wake up is just different. You're out of the blocks in a more calm and rested manner. And for me personally, even with the CPAP machine and every 8 hours or 7.5 hours, I just don't wake up with the same verve. And I attribute that to just physical and mental healing is more efficient. But you know, you got to give it time. You got to give it a few months for people to say, "Man, you look really different," or "Golly, how did I lose all this weight?" Or, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. Some things do happen overnight, but not everything. And it's not really a placebo effect, because I have people who tell me, "I know this is not going to do anything," and then lo and behold, it does. Because you are not a big believer.
No. I told my friends, there's no way this is going to happen. Right. There's no way that I'm going to feel this way. I mean, come on. And overnight, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I can tell you, there's two things like you can't fake in life. You can't fake confidence. You know, you either have it or you don't. And you can't fake pain, because it brings you down. It just, I mean, you're a doctor, you know, it brings your mind down, and your fatigue and your energy. And now that I don't have that element to deal with, oh man, I feel great.
Stan says he sleeps from 11:30 to 7:30. Ooh, that's a nice solid 8 hours. Good for you. Literally. And that's the wonderful thing about taking TA, is that people do notice it right away. I have to sometimes hold hands initially, because, again, the middle of the night awakenings, they can go away if you expect them. So if your super consciousness knows they're gonna happen, and Dr. Park said just to close your eyes, almost everyone goes right back to sleep. But eventually, the brain will say, "Oh, that's gonna happen. Well, let's just ignore it altogether," and so you're not even conscious of it, and then it doesn't even happen. So eventually, most people can get to just solid, you know, unprecedented blocks of sleep, which is so wonderful to go 7, 8 hours, and especially for whatever reason, as we get older into our 6th, 7th decades, it's very hard to get that continuous sleep. And part of it is functional because of our own egos and our concerns, but I'm convinced a lot of it is this clock is so gummed up, you know, and so anybody else notice that their circadian rhythm is more precise, or they get sleepy at the same time every day? I certainly think that's the case for me. Stan says fish oils are good. You know, Todd Morrow, who does a blog He does these funny videos where he says, "Hey, his TA's not working," and right after he quits, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm a totally different person." It's pretty funny. But he had a nice little cocktail he recommended to me yesterday about avocados and fish oil, kale, a lot of these superfood things. So the only thing I'm absolutely adamant about is that you take some kind of fatty snack, because the bile is what allows it to be absorbed at such a higher rate, I believe. Carrie Schonberg asks, does anyone use a light alarm clock, the kind that gradually gets lighter in the morning? No, but that's fairly brilliant. No pun intended. I saw one kind of alarm clock that was ridiculous, actually like a helicopter that makes noise, so you have to actually physically get up and grab the helicopter out of the air. I can't imagine the scenarios and the comedy that could ensue from that. But can you imagine the diabolical mind that thought that up, a loud helicopter that you have to turn off? So again, the whole topic of daily rhythms is an interesting one with regard to temperature, mood, appetite. And I'm just kind of putting together a pastiche of symptoms that people tell me over the years. And again, I think that you could hand wave and guess at many different mechanisms, but it's a symphony of hormones.
When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall?
Wasn't it yesterday when they were small?
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sun clouds, blossoming